specific with us again to this topic, not fucking metaphors. If
Oh,
you're on
sorry,
private
what do you mean?
property, which property am I talking about? What are you talking about? Somebody's house property, a condominium?
Yes.
Taking who out?
Private, right, private property.
Somebody getting police. Like, again, you're speaking in metaphors.
No.
Specific to this topic.
Private property. Whatever private property is private property.
Okay.
Private property is going to be property that's owned by an individual. Okay. There's going to be a name that's going to own a piece of property that they've paid for, they've secured.
Okay.
Okay. So a home. Okay. So in a case where these people, whoever they are coming, displacing, taking people outside of their homes, that's war. That's war.
Okay, so Bima, I'm gonna ask you a quick question since you need a bunch of statements and metaphors. If your neighbor is an active shooter in your area, can the police come to you and say evacuate because there's an active shooter right now in your neighborhood? Well, they're gonna force you to evacuate for your safety?
So
yes or no?
So there's two answers to that. Bear with me. Hold on. Legally, right? Because of this perceived social contract which I reject. Okay. But legally, if you want to appeal to authority and appeal to legality, yes, legally they could do that.
Okay, so
but morally, can they do that? Absolutely not.
Bima, if your next door neighbor has a fucking bomb, and it might go off, and they need to send in the bomb squad, are they evacuating the area until they fucking disarm the bomb?
They don't. You cannot force it. That's the whole point of private property. No.
So if somebody has nothing to lose, and they don't understand the difference.
Let them stay there.
So then you would want. Then later on, you want articles. Oh, Israel's killing civilians. Oh, they're taking out terrorists because the terrorists are hiding behind civilians.
No, what you have to do.
How do you expect this to work?
Sure, because you can't indiscriminately bomb. You have to actually know who you're targeting. You can't target indiscriminately civilians and civilian areas and populations because there might be somebody there. Because you wouldn't do that in Israel. You wouldn't say if there was Hezbollah, if they went into and they were hiding as IDF, okay, they were fucking wolves in sheep clothing, right? They're inside. You're not gonna say, oh well, you know what? I'm gonna blow up no, and you know why? That exposes the hypocrisy of the value of the human being. Okay, the point is you're not gonna bomb a fucking entire area. Stop being lazy. Stop that's what I'm saying. Stop being morally lazy. If you want to get Hezbollah, you go and get Hezbollah. You do not hold on, and I'll finish, and then I'll hear you. Hold on.
Your house might get shrapnel that might get your house damaged.
Hold on.
Okay, later on, deal with insurance or so on. But your life is different between insurance that's going to pay you off for a fucking structure compared to your life. Because once you don't have a life, no insurance is paying you. Nothing. You're not going to see that money. As long as you're alive, you can rebuild. Okay?
Oh, right. Well, this is the thing.
Well, this is the thing. So you're considering your life right now. You're being my life, my rights. What are you? It's not a freedom fighter. This is people. If you don't think for yourself, there's going to be governments that come and start thinking for you, and they're going to tell you what to do.
Right, and that's bullshit. And that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that's bullshit, and it's because that's war.
That's bullshit.
No, hold on. It's according to you. You're saying because
and a person that understands the difference between how much life is valued, that they don't want civilians injured, and yes, the home is a structure. Let it get fucking bombed. It can be always rebuilt. You cannot fucking rebuild a human once he's in fucking pieces.
Okay, so you don't know any better than another human being. You respect every human being.
No, I understand.
Okay, hold on, just wait a second. Hold on. You respect every human being. And unless you think that you have some moral authority over your neighbor or you have some better idea than the person next to you, you have no moral authority. All it is some mumbo-jumbo, fucking mysterious magic words on pieces of paper that you think you could go and remove people from their private property. If they think that it's a good idea, Rafi, they'll leave. If you go to them and you say, hey, look, we're going to be doing this, take it upon yourself. If you get killed, we can't help it. Let them make their decisions. But I'll I'll tell you. Hold on, but part two. But Rafi, part two. There's part two. There's part two. But there's well, hold on. No, because I let you finish. We got to go back and forth. And I'll finish. I'll finish quickly. I'll finish. But the part two. But this is together. So let me just finish this.
That's not fair. You can do points.
Well, it is fair because I need the second point. I need to get the second point off. So the other thing, and I forgot. So fucking go ahead.
Okay, so the first point that you said, if he wants, they can stay. Those people have nothing to lose. But tomorrow, let's say they do what you say, stay there. They decided to stay there because Israel decides not to fucking value life, which they do. Okay, because they don't care for the structure, they care for the life, for the valuing of the person's life. Tomorrow, if that person dies due to military operations because he's being negligent and he doesn't value his life, there's going to be a new fucking article on Reuters. Israel's killing innocent people in war because they're not going to describe, oh, that person was being a fucking dumb cunt and decided to stay in his house and not follow the rules because he didn't value life. The title's going to say Israel's killing people, and you're going to go repeat it like a bird.
Okay,
and
well,
that's how anti-Semitism starts.
Okay, well, listen.
Same thing with you. The problem is with people like you, anything you'll do, you always find a reason to see the negative in it without seeing the positive. Same thing, if tomorrow Israel will fucking find a cure for cancer, you're going to say, but what happens if those people wanted to die?
No, what I'm
we have to cure them.
No, what I'm saying.
Why are they being forced for treatments? So let me ask you a different question. When you go into a hospital and you're a threat to yourself, and the doctor sees that you're a threat to yourself, and you say, you know what? I'm not getting admitted. I'm walking out of the hospital, and the hospital takes you and they admit you with however I forgot the words again. My English is not my first language. They admit you because you're a threat and
Baker Act.
Whatever it is.
Involuntarily commit.
Involuntarily
it's a Baker
commit.
Act, yeah.
Okay, sure. Involuntarily commit. Is the hospital is doing the wrong thing in your opinion? Because what after that person wants to be a threat to their life? Are they allowed to lock that person into a mental institution to stabilize
Bima would
the
say
person?
no.
This is what you're basically saying, Bima. If I see as a doctor that this person's a threat to society or to themselves, and I want to better that person, and I impose that act or whatever you guys just said, does that make me a bad guy?
So you're creating an extreme straw man here.
This is
You're
an extreme straw man. What about people are dying because of terrorists are hiding behind civilians, Bima? And you're reading a fucking article, and the way you're reading it without actually dissecting it, that's anti-Semitic. Because you're just spewing a statement without understanding what the fuck that statement even means and why they're doing it. Why are they doing that? Well, when you read it, did you even think why they would do that? Or no, you probably didn't. Why in their opinion? Because what, do you think they're taking the land there?
Well, Rafi, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to respond. I don't have to ask why because I have principles, and what a principle is, and allow me. A principle is irrespective of time, circumstance, and location, right? It's you have a fundamental truth, which with other truths can be derived, which means that it doesn't matter. You can replace any variable. It could be Israel, it could be the United States, it could be my neighbors, and you would remove those variables, and in that same exact scenario, if it was my own family, I would still stand with the exact principles that I'm saying. And the principle is that of private property. So hold on. So my point is
You
that
literally just did the opposite just a minute ago.
Rich, shut the fuck up, please. I don't want to be mean to you, but please. Just stop.
You said, why are you using such an extreme?
Well, I didn't, and I don't know what you're talking about. So listen, this is the point. The principles are the same. You don't have the authority. A government, doesn't have the authority to remove somebody from the home, from their own private property. If you do believe that, you don't. Hold on, Abby, please let me finish. You see me struggling, Abby. Help me out.
Yeah, she's not talking about the way the walls written.
I had to fight through.
You're saying your opinion. I'm saying I just came in, Bima. I apologize.
Thank you. No, it's okay. I'm fighting through Rafi, okay? Because he said that I'm bipolar and I'm inconsistent. I'm letting him say I'm telling him, no, I'm very consistent. My principles are extremely consistent. And that is private property is one of my fundamental consent, non-aggression principle. These are my principles, right? And you're not going to take any human being, any other institution or government. And if somebody has private property and they have a home, you're not going to force them out of their home, because that is war, because that is an objective criteria that's built to say, okay, private property, I have the authority as a human being, right? And unless you believe you have a moral authority over me to dictate what I should and should not do, then yeah, that's what I would consider.
May I respond to you?
So
may I respond to you on that point?
Let me just finish with Rafi. I hope you can understand how I'm not being inconsistent. That same matter what, you're not going to tell people to remove them from their private property. And I guarantee you that Israel isn't paying. I mean, maybe there are, and it doesn't matter, because it ultimately, what I'm saying is that million people that were displaced recently, if it was up to me, they all would have bound together and they would have fought the aggressors to stay in their homes. And if you wanted Hezbollah, if you wanted the terrorists, go and find Hezbollah, the terrorists. That's no problem. That's no problem. I don't mind, and I do not deny you the ability to find people and identify Hezbollah.
Can I just respond quickly on the first?
Upon you.
Can I respond just on your concept and your principle of private property? I'm not going to get into the political end of this. I just want to talk about the logic of what you just said. So, as we live in America, and we have private property, and we have an expectation of privacy on that property. However, we live in a city, a state, let's take the state, where the governor or the head of that state has to protect the health, safety, and welfare of all the citizens of that state. And if you are on your private property and your existence or your use is a threat to the society and the community that you're living in, then to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the entire community, the government has a right to come in and remove you. So I'm going to give you an example of where this happened. And it happens to be in the city where I grew up. Is a very famous case, and they were called MOVE, M-O-V-E, and they were a Back to Africa movement. And there was a bunch of people living in a house, and they didn't believe in hygiene, and they didn't believe in, they were all this back to nature, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to get into all the details. They had lots of children, lots of pets, lots of rats, lots of bugs and all kinds of different pests that were also living within the property. Neighbors would complain because it was so rat infested, and there were little children living there, and they wouldn't control it because they said it's their private property. However, they were a safety hazard for a safety problem for all of the neighbors, and there were constant complaints. The city health officials would come in. They said it's private property. You don't have a right here. This is our property. However, it was affecting the community that they lived in. Ultimately, they got into it with the police. They shot a cop. They murdered a cop that were trying to get into the property because they were a health hazard for the community. The long and the short of it is, many of them went to jail. The city ended up dropping a bomb, an actual bomb from a helicopter onto the house, and bombed the house, and it also destroyed several of the other houses on the block. And it was a very famous story, and you can read about it. But it talks about...
Hold on, did they evacuate the people and force
They evacuated all the neighbors. All the neighbors were evacuated.
Yeah, but she agrees with all that.
But let me just finish. Let me just finish the story.
Don't they have the choice to stay?
They didn't want to leave their property.
Don't the neighbors have a choice to stay while it's
No, the police evacuated all the neighbors because they were dropping a bomb. The neighbors had the choice to stay if they wanted to stay, but for the safety, the police...
So, hold on. You want to tell me, Abby, if my next door neighbor's house about to fucking blow up, the police come and say, we're about to blow up this house, we need you to evacuate. They say, no, I want to stay. The police are going to let me stay in my house while they drop a fucking bomb?
No, they're going to remove you.
Really?
Yeah, and Bima said, yeah, but Abby, you're missing it. Her ideology.
I mean, I just heard the part you were saying, Bima, about private
She would
property.
agree with the black people.
Wait,
there,
let me just explain. When you were talking about your concept of private property, your property doesn't exist, in a vacuum. It exists in a town, in a village, in a city, in a state, in a country where there are rules and regulations. And yes, in that scenario that I just gave you an example, they refused to leave their house, and they were arrested, they were removed, and ultimately the house was incinerated by a black mayor of the city. And the group, there's a documentary that just came out on Netflix about this story. So the first part of what you're saying, no, your house, although you have that expectation and that right to privacy, under our Constitution, the policing powers of a government override that private property when there is a compelling need. When there is a compelling need to protect, hear my words, because this is the law, a compelling need to protect the health, safety, and welfare of citizens. So that's how our law works, at least in the U.S., and there's case after case about it. It's a very hard test for the government, for a court to say the government has a right to take away your private property rights, that it's strictest scrutiny. It's the highest level of scrutiny our court applies, but it will take those rights away if it's protecting the rest of the citizens. Now I'm done.
Go ahead, Bima. Agree with the black people and say that was wrong what they did to them.
That they were an innocent life compared to a structure.
Oh no, Bima would have been on the black people's side. She's gonna be as soon as she comes off mic and tell you how it's
You
wrong.
can Google. I can put the stuff about moving the
non-aggression principle.
It was Wilson Good was the mayor that dropped the bomb on the house.
I mean, if you think about it, it can't possibly be the case that this refuge that you can have in your house is absolute, because otherwise people could just mount machine guns on their houses and sit inside and just shoot.
That's why she's an anarchist.
It's not a...
Yeah, but if you're an anarchist, okay.
But
But
Delbert,
no
Africa,
working...
Michael, Africa, they all had Africa as their last
Yeah,
name.
but no working society could work this way. Because, like I said, you could mount machine guns, shoot everybody passing by, and say, "Oh, well, we can't go in and arrest anybody because they're inside their own private property," and it just doesn't make any sense.
So the conversation was, and I'll give you a little breakdown of it, that Israel is running operations right now in Lebanon. And they're running operations because Hezbollah is in Lebanon, and they are sponsored by the IRGC, which Israel and America are right now fighting a war with. And so while Israel has boots on the ground there, they had to evacuate people from a certain area in Lebanon where there's military operations. They're not evacuating Hezbollah, they're evacuating innocent civilians where they don't want their lives to be taken due to the operations. And the problem was with Bima, she was sitting in a room today, I would say in a black room again, and everything in life is everybody else's fault but mine. Let's read an article and judge it. And she wrote how Israel is doing this. She's just reading an article without dissecting it and claiming this is the story. And I asked her a question, like, Bima, why would they do that? Because they value life. You don't see it in such a way. You're seeing as Israel's coming as the aggressor and taking people out of their homes like it's a bad thing. Instead of saying, wow, Israel actually cares for a fucking country that has nothing to do with them, for the people that have nothing to do with them, for their life and safety. She is criticizing how the operation, but I'm saying those people wanted to stay. They have the right to stay. Yeah, they have the right to stay, but you have to be fucking psychotic just because we're not fucking animals. And the way you're portraying and reading that fucking article and trying to say that we're animals, because if we would have let them stay, we would have killed many civilians. And tomorrow a new article would have came out and said, Israel killed civilians. And you're going to sit there on stage repeating like a fucking monkey see, monkey do. And blaming again because people people like that have shitty lives, and they blame everybody for their shitty life around everything around them, but not to reflect why is my life shitty? What makes me a shitty person?
Well, you have a
Instead
good
of blaming others.
But you have a good point. What you have happening there is recharacterizing the humanitarian effort as a violating people's rights. So it's kind of crazy.
So anyway, like I said, tomorrow.
Rafi, can we hear from Bima? What's her take on all this?
Yeah, it just sounds like a bunch of institutionalized justification for violence. That's what it sounds to me.
Wait, are you replying to Abby's story?
What about my story, Bima?
Both.
With
Both.
the Africa movement.
Yeah, I can respond to that. So,
assume you're the mayor of the city and this is happening.
Right.
Would you?
Right. So if I was the mayor or the city of the city, obviously we would come up with some negotiations and some situations with the people to let them know what their harm just because you have a choice on your private property, as soon as you start to affect people around you, right? And that's what you said was happening, that they became a well-being nuisance, right?
Plus they had little kids, so it was welfare checks also that the city was doing because there were babies in there.
Okay, perfect. So you can't just do whatever you want, right? As soon as the things that you're doing are going to trespass or begin to interfere with others' private property, you're no longer in the realm of private choice. You're in the realm of damage, invasion, harm, reckless endangerment, when you specifically are causing that. So that scenario is I can't. I mean,
you understand the limitation.
I don't justify. I don't justify what they did ultimately, because what I understand happened. What I understand happened was that what I'm learning is people died in the fire. 5 children were killed, and more than 60 homes because of this one home. And that's what I hear is nothing but justified violence
and the murder of a police officer too.
That's insane to me, and that's a crazy justification, right? There's a million ways that.
Well, what would the million ways be, since they refused to leave and they shot a cop when they tried to get them out?
Give us two.
What? Give me what you would do if they refused to sit down with you.
2 ways.
So how would you get? And when they tried to reason with them, they came out with guns and killed a cop. So what would you do to remove them from the premises? And they refused to, and you're at a standoff, and you're the.
That's war, Bima.
Well, I definitely wouldn't drop a bomb that killed 5 children and 11 innocent people and destroyed 60 homes. That definitely wouldn't be the case. If it was one home, right, there would be a direct issue with that one home, right? I mean, like, what are we talking about here? Do you think that would be justified today? Are you talking about a justification? Are you justifying that as that was the right thing to do?
Am I was a young lawyer when this happened, and I remember the murder trial of Officer Ramp that they murdered. I do remember that. I remember the problems. This went through more than one mayor. It was, years of fighting this group and trying to get this group to.
Hold on, Abby.
So let me finish. So let me finish up so I can address it everything. Rafi, let me finish.
Rafi, let her finish.
So ultimately, yes, a community, the members, the neighbors, they all have a right to defend themselves against what was happening on their property from the cause of the home, right?
What about
and that's their self-defense. No, I don't believe that that's just some mystical right to do whatever you want. That you just place a government and they get to just do whatever you want. No, I think that's bullshit. I think it's bullshit.
Let me do
right?
this.
Rafi, let her hang herself.
The people had the right to defend themselves. If there was hazardous things happening on there, they had, because they're the only ones that do restitution. Nobody else is due restitution. So they had the ability to stop whatever was happening. Yes, they did. Okay, right. So it's not
who
like
was in the right and who was in the wrong on that one?
definitely not the government. Definitely, there were two actors, and the government was way wronger than the fucking people that were on the property. Because I mean, you're talking about they destroyed 60 homes, and they killed kids and children.
Yeah, but
if you were to justify that today, I think that's insane. That's barbarism. That's institutional barbarism. That's exactly what that is. It's a state bombing somebody. You're multiplying the harm, killing innocent, destroying not just 2 or 6 or however many 60 homes. All right, that's not community. That's literally institutional barbarism. Okay, so that's what I think about that. I think that it was.
So how would you protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Philadelphia?
In the same way that an intelligent species could figure out, people that are much smarter than me would be able to figure that out. People that specialize in this and take the time needed to figure out how to negotiate and how to figure out
so what I'm hearing is you said it's overreach by the government to have done to go in and with force is what you're saying. That was overreach. So now let's talk about Clive and Bundy. Now let's talk about Clive and Bundy. So if you think the government was overreach for going after people on their private property, then do you think you're justifying the Bundys and Clive and Bundy then?
Remind me of what that wasn't. That had to do with federal land.
Yes.
Wasn't this federal land, right?
And it was a standoff, and there was shooting at cops. Same thing. So, but on that one, was the government overreach going after the Bundys?
Yeah.
So you're saying the government shouldn't overreach, but do you think it was okay for the Bundys to shoot up cops?
What were the cops doing? They were taking their
Bundys' cattle were grazing on federal land.
Mm-hmm. And they were what were they doing with the cattle? What was the state doing? What were the government agents there to do?
It was federal land because Nevada's 87% of the state is federal land, and they were trespassing, claiming that they had the sovereign right to be on that land, and the government told them to leave that land, and they had a standoff, a gunfight, an old-fashioned Nevada gunfight, and the government went in with full force. There were people that died. So was the government wrong in using force? I mean, you just said the government shouldn't use force. Was the government, so are you taking the side of Clive and Bundy then and saying the government shouldn't have come in with force to remove them off government land?
Well, that's an excellent question, and that's why I believe in private property. That wasn't private property. That wasn't private property. That was public property as far as anybody's concerned. Well, I don't believe in collectives. That's because that's a problem. That's what causes the arbitrariness of what the collective and specifically the ruling elite are going to decide to do. Right. That's why private property completely eliminates that, because there's a specific owner and it's very specific. There's a very drawn objective lines. That's why private property is a very important principle. So something like that, that's going to get messy, and that's why I reject. That's why I reject this.
So let's say back to
social contract is trash.
Hold on, let's go back to private property. What happens? You're on your private property, and as Abby said, there's rats, there's feces. You're endangering your neighbors because you're careless. Now your neighbors are getting sick, which now is a burden on the healthcare system. You're constantly calling the police. It's a burden on the police system. And everybody's paying taxes because you have one rep.
Yeah, she already answered that, Ralphie. She said the individual neighbors would have had the right to defend themselves against that, but the government doesn't because it's a collective and they're not individuals.
So you think it should be a wild, wild west?
Yeah, the neighbors should have went in with their guns and fought them.
That's how
No,
much you see.
why does it have to be an immediate escalation to violence? No, the neighbors could have gotten together. They could have, if you wanted to use the government, you wanted to use the mayor, you can say that that would have been the institution in my ideal world that would have been hired to come and deal with the situation. And they would have had, and then this institution would have come in because they would have been hired by the private property owners around, right? Collectively, they would have all put their tax dollars in, their quote unquote tax dollars, right?
With
to pay for this.
Nevada.
Hold on. So I
With
understand that. Hold on.
No, we
But
did
this
that
is the
with Nevada.
okay, how many times are you going to say that?
They voted for the government. They voted for the mayor. They voted for the freaking the military there, and they did vote for it. They fucking voted for it. They chose to have that federal land be federal land.
Okay, so getting back to what I was saying.
Federal land, all the individuals vote for a specific thing, and then the government implements it. That's exactly what you're fucking saying.
Well, if that was the case, then there wouldn't have been an issue because it would have been a clear case. Because then the people would have said the same people that.
In having the shootout because the collective of the people voted for that fucking laws to be the way they were in Nevada.
You mean
and
the majority?
They voted for the 87% of that land to be public or governmental land. So if it's governmental land, that's just all the people voting together that they want it to be that way.
Right,
so
and
all the people together voted for those individuals. Yeah, the Constitution.
And the Constitution, under the property clause of the U.S. Constitution, grants plenary authority to Congress to manage federal property, including land. And
so you agree with the government in Nevada then?
No, because what would happen? No. Well, if you let me talk, the difference would be the difference. It's still the same principles, which is private property. All right, why do you guys act like it? When you're losing, you're acting like children.
Bipolar.
Why are you acting like children? Have I insulted either of you?
No, I'm not.
Have I insulted either of you?
I'm not
So then, when you start to lose, why do you want to personally insult me? Why do you both want to act like children and insult me?
I'm not insulting you.
So you don't think calling somebody bipolar because you don't like the way that I think? You're saying that I'm bipolar. You're saying that I have a mental health crisis.
That's correct. You do.
All right.
You have an anger.
Rich, stop.
You have an anger issue, and I'll tell you why.
Oh, an anger issue.
Yes, and I'll tell you why. You're mad at life. I don't even need to be a psychiatrist to tell you this.
Dude, I love life. What are you talking about? You're wrong, Rafi. Stop.
No. You don't love life.
Don't. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to be psycho. This is sick. This is some sick shit.
I don't have to be a psychiatrist.
You can't possibly believe the shit that you're doing, Rafi. Rafi, I hate life. I hate life, but you're going to insult me and result to personal insults because you can't just conduct yourself as an adult and have a back and forth. Abby doesn't have a problem with it. Abby doesn't insult me personally. Okay.
Fucking lesson here.
Because Abby's not intimidated. Abby isn't intimidated by me. That's why.
Nobody's intimidated by you.
That's bullshit.
Just have the argument without insults. No reason to call her bipolar, hates life, all that.
She's literally said that she's bipolar and that she
No, I'm not fucking bipolar, Rich. Stop.
She's bipolar or not,
Sick shit.
We can just
This
discuss
is
the
some sick
issue.
shit. I'm fucking out of here. No, you guys are ridiculous.
No, let her speak.
Demon, take a look at that.
She left. I'll tell you why, guys. She's good at dissecting everything in a negative fucking way, but she doesn't see the positive or the good reasoning of it. Because when I give her the good reasoning, she still goes for a negative outcome. Everything I saw her already for the past week, I've been noticing how she speaks. Again, I grew up a little bit different. I'm a little bit more old school. I watch how people talk, how they flip-flop this and that. I'm not a fucking graduate or anything, but I know common sense. And I know common sense very fucking well. And I know when I see a sick person, delusional person, and she has a sick problem, she will take anything and turn it into a negative,
Have you ever
she will
used
blame everybody.
orphans to study
Everybody
experimental
around her
medicine?
for her shitty life,
Have you
but
ever engaged
herself.
with mothers in prison
She
to
will
study
find every
experimental
reason
medicine? Yes.
to find a negative
Have
and
you
a
ever used
positive.
individuals under
Instead of
prison
finding from a
colonial
negative
rules to study
situation a
experimental
positive
medicine?
thing.
Yes.
She'll never reflect it. She's always going to be
Did you do so
miserable.
in the Belgian
And I'm sorry,
Congo?
these are the
Yes.
types of miserable
Have you
cunts
ever
that make
expressed
society
that it's
fucking
better to
horrible.
experiments?
No, the problem's actually more fundamental than that. So she's under the belief that, look, these problems can be resolved through peaceful negotiations through their neighbors, and you don't need a government involved. And to the extent that she's correct, that happens now, right? You have a neighbor, let's say, who never cuts his grass. So it starts by people going over and telling him, hey, can you cut your grass? You know, it's causing problems, blah, blah, blah. And if it works out, that's great. Problem resolved. The issue is what happens when you have a person who refuses. That's when you need the police action of the state. Somebody has to go in and say, no, you're going to have to do that, or we're going to impose fines.
Yeah, but she already conceded that. She conceded by saying that if the collective group of individuals come together and then hire the mayor to implement these rules, but we've already done that. Nevada already did that when they already fucking had elections and voted these individuals into their positions to govern the state.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you. When she acknowledges that the police action is required at the point that the person refuses, the other solution she was talking about is a variety of negotiations and voluntary agreements. That's fine. That's already in place now. It's when it breaks down. When the group says, no, I'm not leaving the house. When the group says, I'm going to commit criminal activity, at some point the state has to take action, and that involves arrest, intervention, whatever it is that they have to do.
You know the irony, guys, why I brought it up? Wait, hold on. The irony, because the left is really funny with this. They'll take the position of the move back to Africa people against the city going in, and I agree. I mean, Wilson Good, it was how he dropped the bomb and the results of it. I mean, it's lots of criticism of it, but the idea of the city going in and removing them and taking possession of it, the left will argue the city was wrong and they didn't have those policing powers. But then if you tell them the Clive and Bundy story, they'll argue, oh, the government should have gone in with these sovereign nation or sovereign rights people that don't believe in, government power. And, like in that situation, because the Bundys took all the rifles and went, and had the standoff, they'll take the side of the government. It's just, that's why I brought up the Bundys, because I hear it all the time. I mean, there's such inconsistencies on it. Yeah. And it's really the same story with both.
She's not taking a principled position. So she acknowledges that the state has this police power to take action. Where her issue with MOVE was the execution. So the execution issue is separate from the principle of whether the state has the right to act. So the state has the right to act, whether they took proper precautions or took the right steps is a totally different issue.
But the state has the right to act. That's the point. There's a point where you just don't live on that island. I mean, you could go find an island where you have no jurisdiction around you other than your own, but that's not how people live in the most of the world. And
exactly. If you want a functioning society, you have to have those limits.
I mean, what's wrong with obeying the law? Just what's wrong with that? I don't understand these people. Matt, you wanted to say something?
Anyway, one of the dudes just got out of prison. That's what one of the documentaries I put in the chat. One of the movement.
Well, what happens is these people have a delusional sense of the right of property. And what they have to realize, if they really believe in the right of property, then you have to also accept the state has to take certain actions in order to maintain that right. Because if
Zuck,
does this violate TOS?
I'll tell you her position on this. she would say that the collective people who agree with themselves, the other people, would then have to take their money and go and hire like agents to actually protect their property. So they want to be able to opt out of like having to pay taxes, having to be part of the government, having to agree with everything the government does. And you would say, well, what about voting? You know, if you don't want to fucking agree to it, then don't vote. They would make the fucking same argument about like taxation is theft, you know, and if you don't pay your taxes, the government will show up and put you in a cage, which is accurate and it is kind of shitty. You know, if you don't want to fucking agree with what they're spending the tax money on. But her shit would be, hey, if we have an issue with this person and they're encroaching and causing violence upon us, then we should be able to go and hire like these mercenaries, and the mercenaries can then go in and deal with it instead of the government itself.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying.
Thing that you can't opt out.
That argument doesn't work. It falls apart because then what that means is anybody can take anybody. Exactly, anybody can take anybody else's property just if they have more force. Yeah, so that means you're negating the right to property. Now you don't have any right to property. The only right you have is to what you can take by force from others. So it actually ends up being the negation of what you want. So that's what I'm saying. If you really believe in the right of property, you have to believe in the right of a state to protect those rights. Otherwise, you don't have any rights.
It's called finding a negative in a negative situation because she wants to go more negative into it. That's why I said this person is a very negative person. Like, oh, this type of person will never succeed in life. It's going to be miserable.
Well, where I
Again, I don't want to.
I just think she hasn't done
Yeah, Kitover, did you agree with her on that?
where I disagreed with her, and we've argued this in the past. My position is at some point the group benefit outweighs the individual rights of somebody. So I think the threshold should be high. People want to stay in their house and do whatever they want as long as they're not impeding or imposing on somebody. But at some point, like, so we talked about heroin. I was like, so you think people should be able to use heroin? She goes, well, yes, if they're doing it on private. And I said, but time is that leads to the degradation of society if you allow heroin, because you're going to get addicted, you're going to run through all your money, you're going to go steal and you know, pillage, and then you're going to get others addicted. It's just going to lead, like, there's a group benefit that she's not taking into account.
It's a ripple effect. It's going to be a ripple effect, a negative ripple effect. Because what's going to happen is later on, you're going to overdose. You're going to end up at the hospital. Who's going to cover your bill when you're a heroin addict?
And how about your kids?
Reviving you from ODing. Who's
going to Rafi, how about also the negative implication effect that you're having upon your children because you overdose and your kids get to see your fucking dead body? Like, how does that negatively affect them?
Do you want to be able to break your kids' legs to punish them? Like, you should be able to raise your children how you want, so I'm going to break my kids' legs.
But it's on private property. But come on, it's private property. You can break your kids' legs.
No, I mean, at some point there is
private property.
Like, I think the threshold for, like, eminent domain should be incredible. Like, I mean, you should have to pay a ton if you're going to take someone's property.
Yeah.
Whether it be like the COVID vaccine, we did not meet the threshold, in my opinion, the death rate, to force or mandate or coerce people to take the vaccine. I thought
no, but those are execution issues. The principle is just. Now, whether the state met the burden, that's another issue.
Yeah,
but the burden has to be what I was trying to say to her. It has to be the strictest level of scrutiny to take away a right.
Absolutely.
So you're right. With the vaccine is a great example, because that is the most compelling standard. I mean, and it's I think I talked about this years ago in a room. I mean, that case is from 1905, and it's still our law, the Jacobson, Massachusetts case. And it set that standard that the court has to weigh how important it is for the city versus that incredible fundament of your right to privacy and of your body. And like it's a great concern, but ultimately, if you live in this nation, you submit to those, what we call our fundamental rights, having some limitations. And the limitation is the protection of the health, safety, and welfare of citizens. I mean, vaccines that are good. I mean, you've raised a good example.
No,
Yeah, and I think
Have you seen
brought up
have you seen the real quick? I was just gonna ask Abby. Abby, have you seen the video making its rounds on the internet about the guy talking about all the different ways that you're taxed? And he talks about how when the British raised our taxes 2%, we ended up revolting and taking our country and our freedom. And then he goes through when you get paid, they take tax. When you spend money, you pay tax. When you buy a house, you pay tax. Every year you have to continue paying tax, or they take your house. And if you don't pay these taxes, they lock you away in a cage. I mean, he's making a pretty good point. I kind of agree with the libertarian mindset on it, but I just don't believe in 2026 you're going to get people, if we abolish tax completely, you're not going to get people to come together.
I haven't seen it, but you know who did that, Rich, is you reminded me of something when you said that. I got to find this. Mitt Romney, when he ran for president, had this whole piece that he did about when you're taxed.
When you die, you pay tax.
Well, yeah, but before you even die, I think before you die, when you earn the money, how much is tax, and then you invest that after tax money into the market, and you have another tax on the gain, and then eventually he starts whittling down from your $1 million that you earned, and he whittles it down, and then he gets ultimately to the estate tax, and whatever was left, then 50% of that goes away. So what your kid would actually receive from the $1 million that you earned, I forget what his final number one was, but it was like 200 and some thousand out of the $1 million that you earned after.
How they have overcome Sabines. This revelation of their great master. Into contradiction. Platforming your content about bringing my great.
Yeah, but the problem is it's not historically accurate, and the $1 million analysis is not realistic either. So what happened, like in the the Boston Tea Party incident, was not that the British were raising taxes; they were actually lowering taxes. And that's what caused the problem, because they had in New England, a lot of the merchants had been engaged in a network of what do you call that, smuggling, and had they created a very viable black market because of that, because the taxes were high. And then when the British lowered the rates, the problem was that was too competitive, and that's why they had a revolt. So it wasn't because the taxes were going up, because taxes were going down.
By the way, guys, there is not going to be a deal, and I think we're going to have boots on the ground in a couple of days.
What's like, Abby? How do you feel about the ideal of what Texas proposed about eliminating property tax and removing all property tax? Then we wouldn't have a state income tax plus property tax, and then they would just have to raise like the sales tax a little bit.
So how much would the sales tax have to go up to get revenue for the state?
1% or something is what they.
1% of a sales tax increase could get rid of all the property tax, and there'd be enough revenue in the state.
It was something around that. It wasn't too radical what they proposed.
Wait, I mean, I don't know what the state budget is, but I mean, how does sales tax?
If you eliminate the property tax, then in essence, then you do actually own the property, and it can't be taken away in the sense of like, if you don't pay taxes, then men with guns will show up and put you in a cage and seize your property. That was the argument they were making.
But I don't understand the math. How's the math work?
Basically, it's the same thing that.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know the exact numbers, but I know it wasn't too crazy.
There's problems with it, even if you could get it to work. Other than the sales tax would have to go up pretty significantly. So the way property taxes works in most jurisdictions it funds certain local things like schools and whatnot. So people that live in better neighborhoods have higher property values, they pay higher property taxes, and they're able to fund better schools, which, you know, some people say, you know, creates a lot of disparity. But if you change it to a statewide funding, then presumably those communities would no longer be able to benefit from having extra funds available for their schools, and they would lose their advantage of having
specifically, like in Texas specifically, like the county that I live in is like 8.25%, but I think like wide is like 8% or something. So like the individual counties and stuff have different taxes. There's some that are as low.
Oh, different sales taxes, you're saying, so they could have different sales taxes.
Correct.
Yeah, but that wouldn't help because these communities are primarily residential, and so even if you raise sales tax very high, they're not going to have more funds available.
I still don't understand how the